9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so now we're starting the second morning session on Monday, September 2nd. Okay, so now we come to the section on Sankhara Paccaya Vijnanam, the volitional formations as a condition for consciousness. And actually, I found this section in the Visuddhimagga very, very dense and almost incomprehensible, even for myself. So what I did was to create my own file in order to show how the sankharas are a condition for consciousness. But first, let's just look at this first paragraph of the Visuddhimagga, the highlighted portion. Okay, so with formations as a condition, there is consciousness, and consciousness, according to the sutta method, is said to be sixfold: consciousness of the eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind. But according to the Abhidhamma method of analyzing consciousness, what is meant by the consciousness that is conditioned by sankharas are the 32 kinds of mundane resultant consciousness. Now, to see what these are, okay, so we have amongst the rootless resultants, we have 7 results of the unwholesome. Can anybody rattle those off right off the spot? 7 rootless resultants. So we have 5 unwholesome resultant types of sense consciousness: eye consciousness, ear, nose, tongue, and body consciousness. Okay, then following the moment of sense consciousness is the moment of receiving consciousness. So there's the unwholesome resultant receiving consciousness. And then there is after the receiving consciousness, there's the unwholesome resultant investigating consciousness. So those are the 7 rootless, without any roots. And what's interesting is that all of the results of unwholesome consciousness are rootless. Or all of the chittas that are the results of unwholesome karma are rootless, which means if it's rootless, it's relatively weak. Maybe that is why, even if one remains bound in samsara for millions of aeons, the door to liberation is always open, because the results of the wholesome chittas have roots. At least many of them have roots, so they're stronger than the unwholesome chittas. Okay, then we have 8 wholesome rootless resultants. So what are these 8? Okay, the 5 types of sense consciousness: when one is seeing agreeable forms, hearing agreeable sounds, and so on, touching agreeable bodily sensations. So those are 7 or 5 wholesome resultants. Then there's the wholesome resultant receiving consciousness, the wholesome resultant investigating consciousness, accompanied by equanimity. So those are 7, which are the wholesome resultant mirrors of the unwholesome resultants. And then on the wholesome side, there's 1 additional citta. What is that 1 additional citta? Right. It's the wholesome resultant investigating consciousness accompanied by joy. So that's the eighth. So that's 15. We have to get to 32. So we have the sense sphere resultants with the beautiful resultants. These are the resultants with roots. So that's 8 and 15, 23. Then we have 5 fine material sphere resultants, the results of the jhanic consciousness. And then 4 immaterial sphere resultants, the results of the immaterial sphere meditative attainments. So that's the 32 types of resultant consciousness. And now to see what kind of karma they result from. What I found to be more useful, clearer, and simpler than the Visuddhimagga's rather elaborate explanation is in the comprehensive manual, table number 5.4. Yeah, I'm going to look for the page. Okay. And without some explanation, it can be perhaps bewildering. So we'll have to explain as we go along. Okay, so in the left-hand column are the volitions. These are the sankharas. And then the other columns show which cittas arise through those volitions. Okay, so the first, we have 11 unwholesome volitions. So these are the volitions. If you remember, there are 12 unwholesome cittas. Now, of those 12, the citta that's accompanied by restlessness, that agitated citta, is said to be a very weak citta because the restlessness doesn't let it settle down any place. And so that citta is not capable of generating rebirth. So these, in this first row, is showing only the unwholesome cittas which are capable of generating rebirth. So that's why we have here at rebirth, and then there's an asterisk. And so these volitions, these would be the sankharas in the 8 greedy cittas, the 2 hateful cittas, and the citta accompanied by doubt. When they produce rebirth, they will produce rebirth in one or another of the 4 unhappy destinations. Here it's called the woeful realms. So that is in the hell realm, the realm of the pretas or afflicted ghosts, afflicted spirits, the animal realm, and a kind of asura realm. And the citta, the consciousness that arises as a result of those volitions is the unwholesome resultant investigating consciousness, which is accompanied by equanimity. Remember what I said yesterday, that a single citta can perform multiple functions. So the main function of this type of citta is investigating. But this citta also will serve as the rebirth linking, bhavanga, and death consciousness for the beings in the lower realms. So all the animals that we see and the hell beings that we don't see, all of them have basically the same kind of rebirth linking bhavanga consciousness, which is this unwholesome resultant citta accompanied by equanimity that also performs the function of investigation. But here it's performing the function of relinking and bhavanga and death. So that is for rebirth in the bad destinations. Now this second row is going to show which kinds of consciousness, which cittas arise from the unwholesome cittas during the course of life. So these are the volitions in the 12 unwholesome cittas. So these are the sankharas, and this will be the vijnana, the consciousness that arises from those sankharas. Okay, in the sense sphere, everywhere in the sense sphere, 11 kinds of cittas can arise through the 12 unwholesome volitions. Wait, what did I say? I'm sorry, not 11 cittas can arise. The sense sphere, this means all of the realms in the sense sphere. So what are all of these realms in the sense sphere? We have the 4 unhappy destinations, hell, animals, pretas, and asuras. Then the human realm is 5, and then there are 6 sense sphere heavens. So that's the 11 planes of existence in the sense sphere. And what is produced in all of these realms as the result of the unwholesome cittas are the 7 rootless resultants. That is, the 5 kinds of sense consciousness, when there's a disagreeable form or disagreeable sound, odor, taste, or touch sensation, and the unwholesome resultant receiving consciousness, and the unwholesome resultant investigating consciousness. So those 7 can arise everywhere in the sense sphere. Even human beings living at the peak of luxury still will see disagreeable sights, hear disagreeable sounds. When there are protesters outside protesting, and the tax cuts for the rich, and the tax cuts for the rich. And they hear that disagreeable sound. Or somebody, their cook, prepares some special dish for them, and it turns out to be very bad taste, and so they get a disagreeable taste. So that's unwholesome resultants which are arising. Okay, so these are the 7 arise everywhere in the sense sphere. And then in the fine material sphere, there are 15 planes of existence corresponding to the 5 jhanic levels. We don't have to go into them here. And only 4 kinds of unwholesome resultants arise there. This is because the 3 coarser types of sense experience that we find in the human realm don't exist in the fine material sphere. That is, the beings in these planes of existence don't have smell odors, taste things, or feel bodily sensations. They have sight and hearing. So 3 kinds of sensory consciousness, nose consciousness, tongue consciousness, body consciousness, are absent there. But they have eye consciousness, ear consciousness, and then there has to be the receiving and the investigating consciousness. And this will be the unwholesome. Yeah, they even have, even those beings in the Brahma world can see disagreeable things and hear disagreeable sounds. I don't know what it's like, but this is what is said. And so they have, the maturing of unwholesome karma takes place there. So they have 4 kinds of chittas. Okay, then we come now to the wholesome volitions, how these sense sphere wholesome volitions mature. So we have the triple-rooted, superior, wholesome volitions. These would be the volitions present in the 4 sense sphere wholesome chittas with 3 roots. And this is superior 3 roots, where the 3 roots are supported by good conditions. Okay, so these volitions in these superior wholesome chittas will ripen in 7 realms, they'll ripen in the 7 happy destinations in the sense sphere. Oh, as the rebirth consciousness, they will, when they generate the rebirth consciousness, they'll generate the rebirth consciousness into the 7 good destinations of the sense sphere. So the 7 good destinations are the human world and the 6 sense sphere heavenly worlds. These wholesome chittas will never produce rebirth in the bad destinations. Okay, so they can produce their results in the 7 happy destinations, and the kind of chitta or consciousness that they produce as the rebirth consciousness, since they're superior 3-rooted, so they produce the sense sphere resultants. I wish that I had. What I'm going to do is create another version of this file so that I could have switch from one to the other easily. Okay, so these triple-rooted, superior, wholesome volitions will produce as their rebirth consciousness the 4 sense sphere resultant chittas accompanied by knowledge. So it would be, here we have 8 resultants, sense sphere resultants, 4 with knowledge, 4 without knowledge. So the resultants that they produce, because they have the strong root of wisdom or non-delusion, they'll produce a resultant rebirth consciousness with that 3rd root of wisdom or non-delusion. So there are 4 chittas that have the root of non-delusion. And that will become the rebirth consciousness, the bhavanga, and the death consciousness for the very fortunate beings in the good destinations. Okay, then everywhere in the sense sphere, this triple-rooted superior wholesome citta will produce 8 rootless cittas. So we already know what the rootless cittas are. Again, the 5 sense consciousness, the receiving consciousness, the investigating consciousness accompanied by equanimity, and the investigating consciousness accompanied by joy. So it produces these 8 rootless resultants, and it also will produce the 8 beautiful resultants in the course of existence. These beautiful resultants arise in the form of the registration consciousness, the consciousness that occurs at the end of a clear and distinct cognitive process, registering the object. It's a bit strange to me. I just don't quite understand how a resultant citta performs this function of registration, but that's the way it is. Okay, so we have 8 rootless resultants and 8 rooted resultants resulting from the volition in the triple-rooted superior wholesome cittas. So this is another case of sankharas. These are the sankharas conditioning vijnana in the form of these kinds of consciousness. Okay, this is something now we come to the fine material sphere, how the 3-rooted superior wholesome cittas produce results in, remember there are 15 planes in the fine material sphere. And this was something that was driving me crazy this morning. Before I came here at 9 o'clock, I was just doing a review here, and I was looking in this chart that I had in the electronic form, which I downloaded from, it was made freely available from the Pariyatti website. And it had, okay, for these 3-rooted superior wholesome cittas will produce 5 types of rootless cittas as their results in the fine material sphere. That's seeing and hearing consciousness, and the receiving consciousness, and then the 2 kinds of investigating. So those are the 5 rootless resultants. And then this chart had 8 rooted resultants in the fine material sphere. And the function that would have to be performed by those cittas would be the function of registration. But I knew from the past that registration doesn't occur in the fine material sphere. So I was wondering, how did 8 get in here? Did I make a mistake? And then it gave the total as, 13? 5 plus 8 is 13. Could I have made that mistake? And I was tormenting myself. How could I have done that? Then I came this morning, because I left my copy of the book up here, and I opened it to this chart, and I see that I had 0 here and 5 as the total. So it seems that this was published by Pariyatti, that somebody, an editor there, had looked through, maybe somebody who knows the Abhidhamma, and I don't recall anybody consulting with me about that, but thinking, oh, there must be 8 registration cittas that Bhikkhu Bodhi had left out, and they added this. And then they put the total as 13. and they did the similar thing down below here. But then when I looked at, this was the version from Sri Lanka, the Sri Lankan edition, which you have it too. Yeah, so this is the version that I had edited without any changes, and somebody came along and meddled with it. I'll have to write to them about that. Okay, so the triple-rooted, superior, wholesome chittas in the fine material sphere, they'll produce the 5 rootless resultants, and that's all. Oops, I'm sorry. We're still at the 3-rooted, superior, wholesome. So they produce these 5, only those 5. Okay, then we come to the inferior, triple-rooted sense sphere chittas and the superior, 2-rooted, wholesome sense sphere chittas. So when they produce rebirth in the sense sphere, in the happy destinations, the good destinations of the sense sphere, in the 7 realms, the human realm and the 6 heavenly realms. And when they produce rebirth, they produce a rebirth consciousness dissociated from knowledge. So they produce a rebirth consciousness with 2 good roots, even though the causal volition has 3 roots, but it's an inferior grade of 3 roots. And so when it produces its corresponding rebirth consciousness, it produces only a 2-rooted rebirth consciousness, not the triple-rooted. And I keep on thinking that this is the way with the Theravada commentators. If it was a Mahayana commentator, they would give the rebirth person the benefit of the doubt, let him get 3 roots. But these rather austere, severe Theravada commentators think, if you don't get the superior 3 roots, you don't get 3 roots on your rebirth consciousness. We'll have to ask your friends at Blue Cliff. How many roots do you get with the 3-rooted inferior causal consciousness? I'm sure they'll say, you get 3 roots. Give them 3 roots. Ah, shucks, I want a root of non-delusion. Too bad. You didn't do enough austerities. Okay, then when these chittas produce their rebirth, they can produce their results anywhere during the course of life, anywhere in the sense sphere, from the lower realms, the human realm, the heavenly realms. And then the results of the 8 kinds of rootless resultants, 5 sensory types of consciousness, which is seeing agreeable forms, hearing agreeable sounds, and so on. And then they'll produce these 4 beautiful resultants dissociated from knowledge. So we get 12 chittas. And then these will also produce results in the course of life in the fine material sphere. And so what they produce are the 5 chittas in the fine material sphere. The wholesome resultant eye consciousness, ear consciousness, then the receiving consciousness investigating with equanimity, investigating with joy. So we have 5 kinds in the fine material sphere. Okay, then we have the double-rooted, inferior, wholesome citta. So this is a citta with only 2 good roots, non-greed, non-delusion, but those good roots are weak. And so this citta can bring rebirth amongst humans and amongst the devas in 2 of these realms. And what it produces as the rebirth consciousness is that investigating consciousness, the wholesome investigating consciousness accompanied by equanimity. So the rebirth consciousness, which becomes the bhavanga, doesn't have any beautiful roots in it. So this is the weakest type of rebirth consciousness in the human realm, I say, and amongst some of the devas also. So this, it said in the human realm, this would be the rebirth consciousness of human beings who are like mentally deficient from, as a result, as congenitally mentally deficient, or who lack certain congenitally incomplete in the sense faculties. If somebody goes like blind or deaf during the development in the womb, that is not the case here. But this is from the very inception of the embryonic period. Already the deficiency with regard to a sense faculty or the functioning of the mind is inherent in the very process of the rebirth consciousness. So that is the citta. And apparently there are some gods who have that problem too. Probably the gods in the lowest realm of the devas. And then everywhere in the sense sphere, this inferior 2-rooted citta will produce the 8 kinds of rootless resultants. Yeah, this is the only result that they produce. So we have the 5 senses, 5 types of sensory consciousness, the receiving consciousness, and the 2 kinds of investigating consciousness. So those are the 8 results in the sense sphere during the course of life, not at rebirth linking. And in the fine material sphere, these inferior wholesome cittas will produce the 5 types of consciousness: seeing and hearing consciousness, receiving consciousness, and the 2 kinds of investigating consciousness. Okay, so this takes care of sankharas as the condition for vijnana, for consciousness in regard to sense sphere volitions. But now we move on to the other spheres. So these are called, collectively, they're called sublime volitions. And this will be easier. Okay, so here we have sublime volitions. These will be the volitions generated with the attainment of the jhanas and the 4 formless or immaterial meditative attainments. Okay, so somebody attains the first jhana, and there are 3 grades in the attainment of the first jhana: inferior, middle, and superior. So if one gains the first jhana, but at an inferior level, that citta, the volition in that citta, will lead to rebirth in the lowest level of the first jhana realm of existence, which is called the plane of Brahma's retinue. So maybe this is a bit like I don't know the British political system so well. Okay, the retinue, this might be like in the American political system, the members of the House of Representatives. Brahma's ministers might be like senators. And the Mahabrahmas, this might be like the, I'm sorry to say this, but okay, like the president and the president's, what's they call it? The cabinet. So the outermost level, the middle level, and then the inner circle. So if you develop the first jhana to the medium level, one is reborn amongst Brahma's ministers, and to a superior level, reborn amongst the Mahabrahmas. Okay, somebody develops the second jhana, and because the Abhidhamma distinguishes the jhanas into fivefold, this gets a little, okay, so this is called the first jhana resultant. Oh yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't complete this. Okay, one is reborn in one or another of these three planes, and the citta that serves as the rebirth, bhavanga, and death consciousness for the beings reborn in these three planes is the first jhana resultant citta. So here we have the fine material sphere resultants. We have 5 resultants corresponding to the 5 jhanas. So it would be the first jhana resultant citta, that is the rebirth linking for the beings in these 3 planes of existence. Okay, now the distinction that's made in the Abhidhamma between the second and third jhanas creates, I have to say, some confusion here is in the determination of rebirth, because we have the second jhana also distinguished inferior, middle level, and superior. At the inferior level, one is reborn amongst the deities or the devas of minor luster. At the middle level, the deities of infinite luster. At the superior level, one is reborn amongst the deities of radiant luster. And one is reborn there with the second jhana resultant consciousness, or the second fine material sphere resultant consciousness. And now, because of that artificial distinction between the second and third jhana, it's said that those who develop the third jhana to an inferior, middle, and superior extent are also reborn, respectively, amongst the Brahmas of minor luster, infinite luster, and radiant luster. So somebody might ask, if somebody develops the second jhana to a superior degree, then they're reborn in the highest of these 3, the deities of radiant luster. But somebody develops the third jhana to an inferior degree, and they're reborn amongst the deities of minor luster. It seems unfair, since the third jhana development is better than the second jhana development, but the one who has second jhana superior development gets a higher reward than one who develops the third jhana to an inferior degree. But what to do? I didn't make this up. Don't blame me. Anyway, the one who develops the second jhana gets reborn with the second jhana resultant consciousness. The one who develops the third jhana is reborn with the third jhana resultant consciousness. Okay, then We have the next level, one who develops the fourth jhana. Again, 3 grades, inferior, middle, superior. The inferior grade is one is reborn amongst the deities of minor aura. The middle development, reborn amongst the deities of infinite aura. The fourth jhana to the superior degree, reborn amongst the deities of steady aura. Kinhasuba, I think. And the consciousness that performs the function of rebirth, bhavanga, and death is the fourth jhana consciousness, the fourth jhana resultant citta. Okay, now we come to the fifth jhana of the Abhidhamma scheme, and which is the counterpart of the fourth jhana in the sutta scheme. And here there's some difference from the preceding model. So we take the case of somebody who develops the fifth jhana, and there's no distinction made here of inferior, middle, or superior. But those who develop the fifth jhana in the normal way, in any of these 3 degrees, will be reborn amongst the deities of great reward or great fruit. This is Vehappala Devas. And they're reborn with the fifth jhana resultant citta. So this is in the Theravada Abhidhamma system. I believe in the Sarvastivada Abhidhamma system, there is a 3-fold distinction of the three gradations in developing the fifth jhana, the distinction of inferior, middle, and superior, and then there'll be 3 planes of existence corresponding to those levels. So the Sarvastivada Abhidhamma therefore has 2 more divine realms that the Theravada Abhidhamma system doesn't have. I believe that's the case. Okay, then there is a realm of existence. This is a rather strange, but it's mentioned even in the suttas, a realm of beings who are called the non-percipient beings. These are beings who don't have any mind, any consciousness, any perception, but they just exist as bare material form. And so it's possible, in fact, for human beings to aspire for rebirth in that realm and then to be reborn there. So say if I develop the appropriate conditions, my wish is to be reborn there, I undertake the practices, then when I'm reborn there, my stream of consciousness is cut off. There's no consciousness. I'm just existing there as a bare material body. But the lifespan is finite there. And when the lifespan comes to an end, then consciousness arises again, continuing where it left off when I entered the sphere, the plane of non-percipient beings. And apparently, I mean, this is incomprehensible to myself, maybe all of us. But in the Buddha's time, there were like yogis who aspired to rebirth in that plane, thinking that to be without perception, without consciousness, that is the highest blissful attainment. Well, it can't be blissful because there's no feeling there. So that is the highest attainment. That's the ultimate liberation. And so they would practice the fifth jhana, and then on that basis of that fifth jhana, they would cultivate a disgust or dispassion for perception, wanting perception to come to an end. And then through the force of their meditative power, on the occasion of death, they're able to put a stop to the continuity of consciousness and take rebirth as a being consisting just of matter with no perception, no feeling, no awareness at all. Did somebody say something? It has material, it's material form, yeah. What it looks like, I don't know. I've never been there. But apparently they have, in fact, the forms are not described at all in the suttas. All that is said is that they have material form, but no feeling, no perception, no volitions, no consciousness. And I think maybe in the other Abhidhamma system, it said that they do have a very subtle kind of consciousness. Yeah, this I don't know. But anyway, for the rebirth in Bhavanga, there's no consciousness performs that function. Of course, there's no consciousness. Okay, then this we're not really concerned with here, but it's included in the chart. This is for those meditators who are non-returners and attain the 5th jhana of the Abhidhamma scheme or the 4th jhana of the sutta scheme. They are reborn in special domain in the form realm called the pure abodes, in which those pure abodes are accessible only to non-returners. And when they're reborn in the pure abodes, then they achieve arhatship or liberation in the pure abodes and never fall back to any lower realm of existence. And they are reborn also with the 5th jhana resultant citta. Okay, then continuing, now we come to the yogis, the meditators who attain the 4 formless meditations. Okay, so we have the yogi who attains the lowest of the formless or immaterial meditations, the base of infinite space. And so when they are reborn, they're reborn in that plane of existence called the sphere of infinite space. And they are reborn with the first immaterial sphere, resultant consciousness. So you see, we have the immaterial sphere resultants, 4 types of consciousness. So they are born with the first immaterial sphere resultant. Those who go further and attain the base of infinite consciousness, they are reborn in the plane of existence called the plane of infinite consciousness. And they're reborn with the second immaterial sphere resultant consciousness. Those who attain the base of nothingness are reborn in the plane of existence called the plane of nothingness with the third immaterial sphere resultant citta. And those who develop the highest immaterial sphere meditative attainment, the base of neither perception or non-perception, when they pass away, they're reborn in the plane of existence called the plane of neither perception or non-perception, and they are reborn, their rebirth and bhavanga consciousness is the 4th immaterial sphere resultant. And so we've gone through this very complex table showing the kind of karma, and this karma is in terms of dependent origination. This is the link sankhara, or the factor sankhara, and then the results here are showing the kinds of resultant cittas that occur through the maturation or with the conditionality of these karmic formations. And so this is the vijnana, the consciousness that arises conditioned by the sankharas. And so when the sutta says simply, sankhara paccaya vijnanam, with volitional activities as condition, there is consciousness. From the Abhidhamma perspective, what the Abhidhamma does is to present in detail all the different sankharas that condition consciousness and all of the different states of consciousness. Test it. Okay, it's working. Okay, we could take a few questions.
So, this description, it's really extraordinary, and it looks to me like a computer game with these different levels that you can do. You can do that. But my understanding is the real purpose of the Buddhism is to get out of all these things. And are there any points in all this to get out, like exit doors, so you can just exit?
Well, of course, that's shown in the Buddha's teaching. And actually, for that, one would have to go. This is showing the functioning of dependent origination, or this is the elaboration of dependent origination. Dependent origination shows the process that maintains the continuity of samsara. So its purpose as such is not to show the way out, but we do find in the Abhidhamma system the way out, which is through the development of the supramundane wholesome chittas, the 4 paths and their fruits, and then the whole system of practice, whether the Noble Eightfold Path, the 37 aids to enlightenment, the structure of sila, samadhi, panya, that's the way out. Okay, Regina, if you take the microphone.
I have a second one. So I have a question. So I understand that, a couple thousand years ago, the yogis had the luxury of developing these meditative states, and that's awesome and stuff like that. But as a modern person and as a person who considers herself an engaged Buddhist, like I do a lot of things, eco-social justice and stuff like that. And I really don't have a lot of time to devote, 8 or 10 or 12 hours a day to meditation. So, and actually I found the non-percipient state really pretty cool. I would love to be in that state afterwards. But so what is a person like me supposed to do who doesn't really have all of these multiple hours every day to devote?
Well, it's a very good question. And the way sort of this, let's say the elaboration or explanation of the Buddha's teachings have developed over time is that, you see, when we look at the suttas, what we see is that for monastics, the Buddha is always sort of emphasizing the attainment of liberation as quickly as possible. And then for householders, He encourages the practice to attain at least stream entry or once returning, and aiming for a celestial rebirth, and then to continue, or a human rebirth, to continue the work towards liberation. But over time, it seems that the Buddhas came to see that the possibility for these attainments became more and more difficult and rarer. So the idea developed is that one forms a kind of aspiration for one of the three modes of liberation or enlightenment, either the aspiration to become a Sammasambuddha, or to become a Pacceka Buddha, or to become an Arahat, one who is enlightened through the teaching of a Buddha. And then one engages and practices to acquire call it the equipment, the capacity for realization. And that equipment then becomes called the paramis or the paramitas. So when we engage in various kinds of wholesome activity that are sort of beneficial to others, we should look at it as developing paramis or paramitas, and then dedicating those paramitas to the achievement of enlightenment in whichever mode corresponds to one's aspiration. So in fact, like, I don't put in 8 or 10 hours of meditation a day. Maybe I'm a little ashamed about that. And I do work of engaged Buddhism or Buddhist activism. So also I see this as ways of cultivating paramitas, though I don't think so much in terms I want to use this as sort of a monetary, accumulating money to buy such and such a goal, but it just comes spontaneously as a response to the conditions of need.
So,
Okay.
can I?
Did somebody?
Yeah,
already?
that's me. Sorry.
Okay.
I wanted to know, what is the Buddhist look at liberation? According to Buddhism, what is liberation? And also, can anybody attain liberation in their lifetime despite their past karmas?
Those are big questions. I think maybe you better save them for later, because what I want now are questions that are directly relevant to the material that I presented.
Oh, today or how about
Just now.
Oh, just now.
Okay.
Not yesterday.
Or something yesterday, but if it's really specifically connected to this.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
Okay.
May I? Okay.
Yeah.
There are two suicides by disciples referred to in the suttas.
Yeah.
And I'd like to know, how does the life continuum or the bhavanga
Yeah.
react to a person, an act of suicide? Does it change the life continuum course for the next life? What happens at that moment?
Maybe say the question
Okay.
again.
The act of suicide,
Okay.
right? I guess the moment before death.
Yeah.
What happens to the rebirth? What happens to the bhavanga, the life
Okay.
continuum?
You mean what kind of rebirth follows if somebody
Right.
commits
Yes.
suicide?
Yes. Does it change course?
Oh, of course, normally committing suicide would be done with a very unwholesome citta. And so that's likely that the suicide is going to generate a rebirth in one of the bad destinations.
Okay. But in the suttas, the Buddha...
Yeah, there are some cases, the cases that you refer to are that of monks who are on the verge of attaining arahatship.
Oh, okay.
But there was some kind of bodily condition that prevented some ill health that prevented them from continuing with their practice. And so they decided to, in this case, to take the knife, is the expression, to
Right.
kill themselves. And in the death process, they achieved arhatship.
Oh, okay.
So there's no bhavanga.
Right. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
With this, we have to stop for the meal break. And those who have questions, like your question, you could write it and put it on the table here. Then I take in the evening. Because it's a big question that needs elaboration. We just had two minutes to end the session. Okay, so now we will break for the lunch and then come back at 10 after 2 for the next session.